Hey guys, today we're starting lesson 11.1 and we're going to be looking at three-dimensional figures and nets. This is starting our chapter on surface area and volume. So before we get into that, we need to understand three-dimensional objects and nets. So the first thing we want to ask ourselves before we really get into this lesson is, what's the difference between a two-dimensional figure and a three-dimensional figure? So for a two-dimensional figure, such as if you were to draw a square on your paper, it would have two dimensions, length and width, or base and height, but it would have two dimensions. So it's like a sheet of paper. If you were to take a sheet of paper, it would have two dimensions. It would have length and width, or base and height. So if a two-dimensional figure is like a sheet of paper, and it has two dimensions, base and height, or length and width, the difference between a 2D and a 3D is that a three-dimensional figure has three dimensions. So, for example, if you were to look at a box that might come in the mail or something, it has three dimensions. It has that length and that width, and then it also has height, and that's what gives it that third dimension. Alright, and then we'll get into what a net is in just a moment. Alright, so when we talk about figures, we're talking about solid figures. So, whoop, that's going way too fast. Thought I had that fixed. Okay, so a solid figure is a three-dimensional figure. It has length, width, and height, which is what we just talked about. Solid figures can be identified by the shapes of their bases, the number of their bases, and the shapes of their lateral faces. And when it's talking about lateral faces, it means the sides. So, I already said that like a box, if you were to get a box in the mail that, every side is a perfect square, that would be called a cube. If you look at a cereal box is a rectangular prism. It's a solid figure. You have cylinders, triangular prisms. There's just all these different solid figures that are 3D. So you just think of your objects that are 3D. Alright, so now let's get into what is a net. A net is a two-dimensional pattern that you can fold up to make into a three-dimensional figure. So for example, if we were in the classroom today, what I would do with you is I would take one of those empty Kleenex boxes and I would cut it at the sides where it's folded till I had one thing laying flat. And I wish I had done that and had an example for you, but I did not. So, but we'll get into some examples of what those look like in just a minute. Alright, so here is a solid figure. This is what we call a triangular prism. And it's called a triangular prism because if you look at the bases, both bases here, there's two bases and they're both triangles. And then these three sides going around it are what we call the lateral faces, and each point is a vertex. So a triangular prism has 6 vertex, 2 bases, and it has 3 lateral faces. Alright, and then we've also got periods, which are solid figures. So a pyramid is a solid figure with a polygon-shaped base and triangles for lateral faces. Like prisms, pyramids are named by the shape of their bases. A pyramid with a rectangle for a base is called a rectangular pyramid. And we'll get into some of those in a little bit. Here's an example. This would be a rectangular prism because you see the base is a rectangle. And notice all the sides are lateral faces. Alright, so looking at example 1, if you do have your book, this is on page 416. We're going to identify and draw a net for the solid figure. So the first off, we're going to talk about the base. So if we're looking at the base of this figure, right here, what shape is the base? The shape is a triangle. So the base is a triangle. All right, then it says describe the lateral faces. So if we look at the lateral faces, we see that they are all triangles. So that would mean that this would be a triangular. It's only got one base and it comes to a point, so that would make it a triangular pyramid. Not a triangular prism, but a triangular pyramid. If there's one base, then it's a pyramid. So my base is a triangle and my lateral faces are triangles. So if I were to draw the net, this is an example of what your net may look like. There's my base and there's my 3 lateral sides. All right, example 2. We're going to identify and sketch the solid figure that can be formed by the net. So if we look at this, notice it only has 2 triangles. So because it only has 2 triangles, it cannot be a pyramid, because a pyramid will have at least 3 triangles. So it can't be a pyramid. The triangles must be the lateral, or bases, bases for the triangular prism. So I'm trying to pause this and keep it from going. I thought I had it paused. Alright, so right here, this is where we sketched it. So sketching them is a little tricky. I don't want you to worry too much about trying to sketch them. Do the best you can. More than anything, I want you to recognize this. So if you were to see this, this would be a triangular prism. It's got that. It's not, the bases are across here. Instead of being on the top and bottom, they're the sides. But those are your bases, and these are your lateral lateral sides, or lateral bases. Alright, so for number 1, we've got identify and draw a net for the solid figure. So if we look at the base, we see that our base here, it kind of looks like a square, but, well, according to the book, yes, we're going with a square. So it looks like a square, so we're going with a square base. The lateral faces are all triangles. So that means that this would have to be a square. It's got one base too, so that would mean it would have to be a square pyramid. So then we draw the net. So right here we have the square is our base, and most of the time this is how I draw these. I go ahead and put the base in the middle, and then I have the triangles going off to show the lateral faces. Now, there are different ways you could do these, but this is just the most common. And if you're having to draw it, that's the easiest. Okay, so next we do have a cube. So a cube is composed of 6 squares, by the way. So if you were to draw this, one of the ways you could draw this would be like a cross. You could also do a capital T. I'm going to have to learn how to paste these presentations if I'm going to keep using them. Alright, on this one, identify and sketch it. So this has 4 triangles. 4 triangles. So this is going to be a triangular pyramid. Here we have 6 squares. So when we fold them, we would get a cube. Alright, here we're going to identify and draw a net for the solid figure. So this does not have a point, so it's not a pyramid. It has triangular bases, so that means this would have to be, there's my bases. So this is my net, where we would have it unfolded. This would be a triangular prism. So on this one, even though it appears that the bases are squares, we typically don't call this a square prism. We call it a rectangular prism. Alright, so that concludes the presentation that I've got on the lesson. I am going to attach another little YouTube video. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so I'm going to attach another YouTube video that kind of covers nets and goes a little more in depth on that. I'm also going to attach your practice workbook pages and an answer key for that as well. comment. Let me know what you thought of this. Let me think if you like trying to do it with a presentation better than trying to do it with a notebook. All right, I will talk to you later. Have a good day.